Okay, well, over the last few weeks, we've been in this series that we titled A Christmas Journey. We've been looking at the different individuals who are all making their way to Bethlehem in the Christmas story. We started with the departure of Mary and Joseph, and then we looked at the journey of the Magi, and then last week we talked about the journey of the shepherds. Today we come to angels, and today we look at the angels' role in the Christmas story on this Christmas journey. And the angels provide for us guides. And isn't it true that any trip, any journey, any expedition you take, you have to have a guide? And so in our Christmas story, the angels are our guide. And it makes sense because my mother has been saying since I was a kid that when you travel, that when you go on a trip, when you go on a journey, that God sends his angels to be around you. By the way, my mother is home for Christmas. She's here this morning. Mom, good to have you back at the Grove. And it's special having her here at Christmas time. And over the years, my entire life growing up, my mother would come home from trips telling us about the angels that she encountered and helped her on her journeys. This has been my whole life, hearing these stories. And sometimes even her own sons and daughters doubted her. But very recently, my mother and I were on a trip together. We're flying, and we had a change of planes in Houston. And we get off the plane in Houston, and we start going down the concourse. We get 5, maybe 10 minutes down the concourse, and then she goes, my engagement ring is gone. I haven't taken it off in 73 years, she said. It's gone, Palmer, it's gone. Now, you have to realize, my mom's here and I love her very much. She's an alarmist. And and maybe your mother is too. Every time we go on a trip, it's like, where's the blue suitcase? Well, I left the blue. No, it's in the trunk, Mom. It's always in the trunk. Anyway, so I think this is just one of those moments. So I'm not at the alarm level she is, that she's lost this diamond ring from 73 years ago. That she says, your dad gave it to me when he was an officer in World War II. Palmer, it's gone. I'm like, okay, when you see the ring, it's certainly not on her finger. I can see that. I'm thinking, check your purse, check your bag. No. She says, it's gone. I know I had it on. And so she says, let's go back to the gate. Now, we're a good 10 minutes down the airport, down the concourse, and I'm thinking, she could have lost this, 10 hours ago on another flight at another airport. Who knows? So we go back to I said, okay, I think we can still make our flight. So we'll go back to the gate in Houston. And the gate agent is still there. And so we tell her, she tells the gate agent, I've lost my engagement ring that my husband gave me 73 years ago. And the gate agent, fortunately, gets really worked up about this. She says, I got to go find it. And she starts running out the door. I start to go after her. She says, you're not allowed, stay here. And so she runs down the jetway. And so my mother says, let's pray. She says, if we want angels to work, we've got to pray. And so right there we start praying. And we hadn't been praying for 2 minutes when this kind gate agent opens the door and she says, it's a beautiful ring, isn't it? And she says, here it is. And I couldn't believe it. And I said, well, who found the ring? She says, the cleaners found the ring. They had set it up on a shelf, and they had found it for. And my mom says, well, can we thank them? She says, no, you're not allowed. You can't go thank them. She says, well, can I give them a thank you tip? And she says, no, you're not allowed to do that. And so my mom says, see, they were angels. And so the angels found her ring. That's my mother's story. And it's true that God sends his angels to guide us. And so in our Christmas story, God sends angels. And I want to start today by giving you a brief theology of angels, kind of an angelology in short. Angels are divine beings. They're beings that God created. They're different than people. They're spiritual beings, but we also see them and interact with them. The word angel in Greek, angelo, means messenger. They are God's messengers. And they bring us messages that guide us. They bring us messages of hope. They will bring us messages of warning. Some angels are healing angels. God sends his angels sometimes to heal. God often sends his angels to guard and protect. Angels play a big role in God's plan. When God is trying to get something done, he'll send his angels. For example, Elijah at one time is surrounded by an army, and God sends a bigger army of angels to protect him that surround him. When the stone needs to be rolled away from Jesus' tomb, what does he do? He sends an angel, we read, to roll that stone away. So angels are enforcers of God's plan. Angels are protectors and guardians of God's people, of you. In fact, I just read recently of a pastor in Michigan. His name is Richard Massingale. And Richard Massingale says that in 2020, when COVID was spreading across the country, he contracted COVID. It got really bad, deep in his lungs. He could hardly breathe, so they intubated him. They put him in a medical-induced coma. He said when he went into the coma, though, he could sense what was happening around him. In fact, he could see, in a way, see things. He says the first thing he saw was a person standing at the foot of his bed. He said it was a very tall man. He said probably 7 or 8 feet tall. And he stood there like at attention, just looking right past him, not saying anything, not moving, just standing there. He said he didn't have white wings or golden curly hair. He didn't have that. But he's standing there, he said, in a dark suit. It looked like he was guarding the president of a country, and he's standing at my foot of my bed, looking right past me, Pastor Massingale says. He says, at first I was afraid, like, who is this? He said, but finally I got up the courage and I said, who are you? He says, this individual at the end of his bed said, who I am does not matter, but why I am here is what matters. And he says, okay, that's a great. So he said he didn't speak to him the rest of the time. 10 days later, as he's coming out of the coma, he's still standing there. And he's the last person that he sees in his unconscious state from the beginning to the end. He says, I believe God sent an angel to protect me. Angels guard us. The Bible has a lot, hundreds of verses about angels. I have a few here just to remind you. This is Paul saying, last night, an angel of the God whom I belong to and whom I serve stood beside me all night. David in the Psalm says this, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you, to protect you in all your ways. And then in Hebrews, the writer of Hebrews says, do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have entertained angels unaware. So angels are present in our Christmas story. This morning, I want to look at the 4 encounters with angels. The first one we're going to start with is Zechariah. So grab your Bibles. Luke chapter 1 is our text today, and we start with this, Luke 1:5. In the time of Herod, the king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah. And Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Verse 11, an angel of the Lord appeared to Zechariah. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Isn't that a great line? Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will call him John. And so the angel is saying to Zechariah, stop doubting. I can do this. And in other words, your prayer has been heard. I think a lot of us, isn't it true that often we feel unheard by people, and we even at times feel unheard by God? Maybe like Zechariah and his wife, you've been praying for something for a long time. And it feels like you're getting very old, and God is still not answering that prayer. And the angel reminds us that your prayer has been heard. And this is a critical piece of our angel theology, of our angelology. Listen to this, that when you pray, God sends an angel. Don't ever forget that. That's what happens with Zechariah and Elizabeth. That's what my mother says happens when she prays, and she's right, that when you pray, God sends an angel. And I think a lot of times we feel like we're praying and praying for something for years, and our prayers have not been heard. And the angel reminds us, your prayers have been heard. What Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth felt, I know what it feels like because Veronica and I felt that. When we got married, we decided that we weren't ready to have kids right away. We were young, 21 and 20 when we got married. So we thought we'd wait a few years. So at about age 25, at the 4-year, almost 5-year mark, we decided, okay, let's have kids. And then we realized we couldn't. And it was devastating. It was like, wow, I can't believe it. So we thought we could just do this whenever we were ready. And so we started to pray, and we started to pray. And maybe the best thing we did, I'll be honest, we asked my mother to pray. It seems like she has a hotline to heaven, and especially for people that need to have a baby. And so my mother started to pray. And then we went to see doctors, and then the good news is the doctors felt that they had found the problem. But you never know. They say we think we found the problem, but you never know. So we kept praying. And then it wasn't too long after that they gave us the good news and said, she's pregnant. She's expecting a baby. And your prayers have been heard. And you see, we had felt like we were getting very old. I was pushing 26. And maybe you feel like you've been praying for something a long time. I just want to remind you today that your prayers have been heard. And for us, every 2 years after that, we had a son until we had 4 sons. And I think God gave us 3 more sons just to say, your prayers have been heard. And so I want to say this Christmas, I hope this Christmas is a reminder, and the angels in the Christmas story are a reminder to you that whatever problem you are facing today, whatever trouble is on your heart today, and you've been praying about it, your prayers have been heard. Here's what we read next, or the next angel encounter we come to is the angels say to Mary, you are favored by God. So let's move down in the text to verse 26. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel, who was sent by God to a town in Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin engaged to a man whose name was Joseph of the house of David. And the angel says to Mary, verse 30, you have found favor to God. Now, the angel says other great things, like nothing is impossible. The angel says you're going to give birth to the Messiah. But the angel also says this, you have found favor with God. You are favored by God. We have to understand when the angel says this, what Mary's standing was like in her community. Okay, and I said this a few weeks ago when we talked about Mary. You see, Mary, of all the things that Mary felt in this moment, I don't believe she would have felt that she was favored by anyone, let alone by God. Because she would have been known as the Sota. She would have been known as the unfaithful one. She would have not felt favored. She would have felt unloved. She might have felt cursed. She would have felt judged. She would have felt inadequate. She would have felt shamed. But she definitely would not have felt favored. But now the angel comes along and says, Mary, you are favored by God. And I want to say that God says the same thing to you. Maybe you feel inadequate. Maybe you feel like you're not enough. And I want to remind you today that the angel says today, you are favored by God. God's favor for you runs very deep. The Hebrew people have a word to describe this kind of favor that God has for Mary. They use the word segula. Segula means precious treasure. Now, the locals would have called Mary Sota, which means the unfaithful one, the shamed one. But God has a different name for her, and that is segula. And Hebrew mothers and fathers sometimes name their daughters Segula because they want to name them precious treasures. They name them Segula. And that's how God sees you, that you are Segula to God. You are the apple of his eye. I think sometimes we forget this. You are the child of a king. You are the one he loves. You are the son. You are the daughter of the King of Kings. You are favored by God. You are treasured like that. So God sends this angel to take Mary out of her lowest place of feeling shame and worthlessness and say, no, you are prized. You are up here. Have you ever felt like that? When I think about this, it reminds me of a story I read in Harriet Lerner's book, The Dance of Connection. Harriet Lerner is a psychologist, a PhD, and she's an author. And in her book, she writes about when she was 10 years old. And Harriet says, when I was 10 and my sister Susan was 12, it was Christmas time. And she said, it had been a hard Christmas, but I still wanted a bicycle. That's all I wanted for Christmas was a bicycle. But she said, my sister and I ran downstairs on Christmas morning, and there were only 2 presents under the tree. And she said, I knew it'd been a hard year, so I realized that we wouldn't be getting much, 1 present each at Christmas. She said, but then I opened the present and my heart sank. She said, it was a black tin tissue box. She used the word tacky, a tacky little tin tissue box with crudely hand-painted flowers on it, like a tissue box you put over a box and then pull the tissue out. And that was her Christmas present. She was so crushed that she said tears started to well up in her eyes. She said, but her sister, Susan, who was 2 years older, saw that she was about to cry and saw the tears start to come down her cheek. So Susan blurts, Harriet, I've heard of these tissue boxes. She says, they're painted by trained monkeys. That's what she says. And Harriet says, really? And she says, yes, there's this place where they've trained monkeys to paint these things. She says, everybody in the country wants these. These are precious, treasured items painted by trained monkeys. Harriet says that all of a sudden her heart swelled and she became happy with her new pride because now she felt it was valuable and she felt more prized because her sister said that. She said, so for years, when she went into junior high school, even into high school, she would tell other kids about these tissue boxes. She would show them to friends and say, these were painted by trained monkeys. And nobody had ever seen this before or heard about it. So she felt very special owning these black tissue boxes. But then she got to college and she came home at spring break and she was cleaning out the closet that she and her sister shared. And she found a term paper that her sister wrote in high school titled The Black Tissue Boxes. And in it, she read the truth about the boxes. She read that her parents, because her dad had lost her job that Christmas, had no money for Christmas presents. But their neighbor down the street painted these black tissue boxes by hand as a hobby. And they didn't like charity, but they took it from him, and that was the gift for that Christmas. And her sister Susan, not wanting Harriet to feel the pain of poverty, makes up this story about the trained monkeys, and then it swells her heart, and she feels loved and treasured. And so do you see, maybe you felt like that. Maybe your heart has been down here. You have felt looked down on. You have felt worthless like Mary or like Harriet. And then the angel comes along and says to Mary, you are treasured by God. You are the favored one. And I share all of that today to remind you of that. I don't know what's been happening in your life or in your family or in your work or with your finances, but don't ever forget that you are favored and treasured by God. Because maybe right now you come to church this morning and you think, bad things keep happening to me. My life is on the decline. Nothing's going right for me. Maybe this morning you think, God, why have you forgotten me? This sickness won't go away. Or you go, God, why aren't you letting me just have enough? I'm putting groceries on my credit card. Or maybe this morning you feel like nobody cares about me, nobody loves me. Why is everyone else thriving but me? And I'm going to say, no. Hear the words of the angel. They're not just for Mary, they are for you. You are favored by God. You are treasured by God. You are his precious treasure. Remember that this Christmas. Take hope. Next, the angels come to Joseph. And the angels, in so many words, say to Joseph, stop trying to control it all. So let's turn in our Bibles back to Matthew. And in Matthew chapter 1, verse 19, we read this, because Joseph, this is Mary's husband, was faithful to the law and did not want to expose her to public disgrace. He had in mind to divorce her quietly. Verse 20, But after he had considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid. Take Mary home as your wife. Move down to verse 24. When Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord had commanded him, and he took Mary home as his wife. Do you see how Joseph was trying to control the situation? Joseph was trying to turn things around, make things different in his mind. And the angel comes along and says, you stop trying to control it all. God has this, take hope. I think as human beings, we naturally try to control things, don't we? I'm going to guess a truth about you. And the truth about you is you're a control freak. Am I right? Because I am. We all are. If you play golf, I watch golfers. Every golfer I know, most of them, slice the ball right? And every golfer, after they hit their drive, they're all leaning this way, and they're waving. Some of them will cuss and swear, but trying to get the ball back on course. None of it works, does it? Because you think the illusion of control is very attractive. We think we control it all, but you can't even control when you take your next breath. You can't control the beat of your heart. There's so much in life that you can't control, but we still try to control everything. And the angel comes along and says, stop trying to control it all. Take hope. Let God take care of this. He's heard your prayer. Sometimes we try to control coworkers. Sometimes we try to control sons and daughters. Sometimes we try to control a spouse or a friend. How do we control people? You think right now I'm not a control freak. You are. How do we control people? Sometimes we bully them with our words. Sometimes we manipulate people. Sometimes we shame or belittle them in order to get them to conform. Sometimes we manipulate or micromanage them. Sometimes you just follow them on Find My Family or Find My Friends. But we all try to control people like Joseph is. And the angel comes along and says, trust God with this. Stop trying to control it all. Your prayers have been heard. I know the angel's right because I've seen it happen in my own life. As a parent, we all are controlling people, aren't we? Let's be honest. How many of you have tried to control your sons or daughters? Can all the honest parents, some of you are not raising your hands. Okay, thank you. Can all the honest parents raise their hands? We all do. I know I did. And then you hit a point where you go, no, I just have to put their life into God's hands. So this son who we almost did not have, that I was talking about earlier, this son who we had when we never thought we would have children, as he got older, we realized he had an infectious personality. He had never met a stranger. He was gregarious. Everybody loved him. And so Veronica and I kept telling him, you're going to be a pastor one day. Even his brothers around the dinner table in junior high school would say, you're going to be a pastor. But then in high school, I think this happens to a lot of high school, maybe guys more than girls, he got a bad attitude. I'm just going to be honest. He started lifting weights, he got really thick, then he shaved his head. I don't know if he's taking steroids or something, but he just got a bad attitude. And he took that bad attitude to college. I dropped him off with a shaved head. I'm like, oh, this is a Christian college. He looks so rough. And but he looked strong. And so we take him to college, and he hadn't been in college long when he tells us, he says this, I'm never going to be a youth pastor. That's what he said. And I was disappointed by that. I was frustrated. I was like, he needs to be a youth pastor. God made him for that. And then it wasn't long after that, the dean of the school called us. And like I said, it's a Christian college. And he says, if he makes one more mistake, we're going to kick him out. That's what the dean said. And we're like, oh no. And I think as a parent, our natural tendency is we want to control it all. But I didn't call him and threaten him, hey, I'm going to quit paying for college if you don't get your act together and commit to being a youth pastor. I didn't do that. I didn't try calling the college and saying, hey, you got it wrong. He's a good kid. You retract your punishment. I didn't do that. Instead, we doubled down on praying for him. Every morning, I would come downstairs, and on my way downstairs, I'd walk past his room, and I would look at his empty bed and get my coffee and sit down and pray and pray and pray and pray. And I just want to say, if you have a problem, you have a situation that you think you need to control and you need to change, Commit it to God. Give it to him. Because I realize this, that his Father in heaven, as much as I love my son, he loves him more. And so I can only trust him. And his senior year, he calls us and he says, I've decided to go to seminary. I'm going to be a youth pastor. That's what he said. I couldn't believe it. And here's the thing. He's a youth pastor now. And last week, Sunday, he preached a sermon at a really great church in Chandler called The Grove. And he preached on joy. And it's a blessing, isn't it? It's a blessing to have a son that wants to go into ministry. And it's a blessing when God hears your prayer. And so I want to remind you, if there's something that is hard for you right now, stop trying to control it all. Let God, give it to him. The angels remind us that God hears your prayer. There's hope, and he will take care of it. Okay, there's one last angel encounter that I want to share with you this morning in our Christmas story. And the angels say to the shepherds and to you, there's hope for everyone. Let's go back to Luke chapter 2, verse 8. And they're the shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks. We're keeping watch over their flocks at night. When an angel of the Lord appeared to them, moved down, and said, do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people. You get what the angel is saying? There's good news for all the people. There's good news for everyone. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. Verse 13, suddenly a great company of heavenly hosts appeared with the angel. So they heard, verse 16, they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby who was laying in a manger. When they had seen him, they told everyone, this is the shepherds, they told everyone they met what the angels had said about the child. So the angels say, there's hope for everyone. There's good news for everyone. And not only are the angels spreading this good news, but then the shepherds turn around and they start sharing this good news. I'm going to use this word this morning. The shepherds become distributors of God's good news. You see, before Jesus is born, good news or hope, there was only hope for the Jews. That's what the Old Testament talked about, is that God was only for the Jews. But then Jesus is born and he starts to say there's hope for everyone. He tells the Samaritans and the foreigners, he says, I am the hope of the world. Then Peter and Paul come along and they say there's hope for the Gentiles, for the non-Jews. There's hope for the Ethiopians. There's hope for the foreigners. There's hope for everyone. People of all backgrounds, people of all races, there's hope for everyone. The early church, and this was one of their first tasks coming out of Peter and Paul's messages, is the early church, one of their first jobs was to become like the shepherds, distributors of this good news, distributors of hope for everyone. The early church spread, or Christianity spread like wildfire, because the early church kept talking about there's hope for everyone. This is why you've heard me say before, the church is the hope of the world. You think that when you come to church, you come to get hope, which you do. You come here to get hope, but you leave here so that you become a distributor of hope to the world. In fact, I'm going to call you this morning. You are a hope dealer. Okay, that's who you are. Maybe you've never thought of yourself like that, but you are a dealer of hope. We have all around our country, we have distribution centers of different kinds, right? All right, and I don't know if you know what the largest distributors of fast food are in our country. I'm going to remind you. Number 5 is Taco Bell. Taco Bell has 7,000 locations across the country. They just brought back the toasted cheddar chalupa, so you can go try that soon. They're number 5. Number 4, fourth largest distributor of fast food is Dunkin' Donuts. All right, distributors of sugar, caffeine, and what else? Salt. McDonald's, number 3, 12,000 locations. Starbucks, they put Starbucks across the street from each other now, 12,000 locations. The number 1 fast food distributor in the country, Subway, 27,000 locations in the country. But there's a larger distributor, do you know this, than all of these combined. The church. The Distributors of Hope have 333,000 locations around this country. What do you think about that? Let's clap for that. Okay? And you are meant to be part of that movement of hope. The angels came and said there's good news for everyone. There's hope for everyone. And then you, as God's people with the shepherds, are to go out and share this message that goes on and on, that there's hope for everyone. Your home should be a distribution center of hope, shouldn't it? Your office, your workplace, your school should be your distribution place of hope. Because with Jesus Christ, we have hope for every circumstance. We have hope for every situation. With Jesus Christ, you have hope for every person that you know. And now, right now, I know you're thinking of people in your life who you think there's no way in this world they would ever give their life to Jesus Christ. All right, can you think about those people right now? Maybe it's someone who works out in your gym, or maybe it's a neighbor down the street. Maybe it's a mean coworker. And you think about this person, and you think there's no way that they would ever give their life to Jesus Christ. I don't say, no, you don't know. God can turn their life around. There's hope for everyone. I want to convince you to believe the words of the angel when they say, this good news, this hope is for every person. The most difficult people in your life, it could be a relative, it could be a family member. There's hope for them. So don't give up. My challenge to you is to become a river of God's blessing and favor in their lives. Maybe you have been a stagnant pool of blessing, keeping it all for yourself. I want to challenge you to become a river of blessing to that person who you think God doesn't have hope for. Start blessing them with your words. Start blessing them with your actions. I think one of the best ways of spreading the hope of Jesus Christ is through radical acts of service, love, and compassion. Let me say that again. I think one of the best ways of sharing this hope of Jesus Christ is through radical acts of service, love, and compassion. When you show the love and compassion of Jesus Christ, people feel that hope. It gets real. A couple of years ago, Paul Gunther and I were talking to the principal at Sacaton, and we said, is there anything we can do to help the kids at Sacaton this Christmas? And she said, we need blankets. I said, blankets? Why do you need blankets? She said, don't they all live at home? She said, yeah, they need blankets. She said, a lot of their parents can't pay for the heat, and so we had a kid in the ER this last week who had frostbite. She said, there's another child who told their teacher that their parents last night tore the cabinet doors off their kitchen cabinets and burned them in the fireplace to keep the house warm. I said, well, blankets, how many blankets do you need? She said, we need 630 blankets. The next Sunday, you at the Grove brought in, when I shared that need with you, you brought in, over that next week, 630 blankets. You see why I say when you, the hope of Jesus Christ spread through radical acts of service, love, and compassion. A few weeks ago at Thanksgiving, we asked if you would help us share meals with people in Chandler. You brought in 668 Thanksgiving dinners in a box with a frozen turkey. And then we got to share those with 668 families. And with each door we knocked on to give that gift, the hope of Jesus Christ spread. The hope of Jesus Christ spread through your radical acts of service, love, and compassion. And it's for that reason that Paul and Melinda Gunther and Live Love are building the Oasis downtown Chandler. Paul and Melinda have wanted to live in that community, but then they want a place that becomes a center of hope in that community. And to keep, not just occasionally show these radical acts of service, love, and compassion, but every day be a center of hope. So I want to ask you right now as we close, would you take out this card, and this Christmas, would you make a gift to Live Up to help get this built? Church, let me ask you this. Can we help get this done? Can we? Okay. Can we do that together? It's going to take all of us. And so as we sing this next song, go ahead and follow that QR code. My challenge to you is to make this gift now, today, before you walk out of this building. If you don't have a cell signal, then wait till you get out the front doors. But I want to challenge you to do that now. All right, Jamie, thank you.